There is a strange moment that arrives quietly in the second half of life. No trumpet announces it. No crowd gathers to witness it. No dramatic event marks its arrival. Yet something changes. The noise that once fascinated you begins to feel exhausting. The conversations that once seemed important begin to feel repetitive. The constant chase for attention, approval, status, and validation slowly loses its grip. And for the first time, perhaps in decades, you find yourself drawn towards something you once feared. Solitude, not loneliness, not isolation. Solitude, the sacred space where a human being finally meets themselves. When we are young, solitude often feels uncomfortable. The silence seems empty. The absence of activity feels unsettling. The lack of external stimulation creates anxiety. We fill every moment, every hour, every corner of our lives. Friends, work, entertainment, relationships, obligations, distractions, anything to avoid being alone with our own thoughts. Because being alone can be frightening when you do not yet know yourself. The young often seek noise because noise provides escape. Escape from uncertainty. Escape from insecurity. Escape from questions they are not yet ready to answer. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. Though he governed one of the greatest empires in history, his writings reveal a man who repeatedly returned inward. A man who sought refuge not in applause but in reflection. Not in crowds but in consciousness. Not in distraction but in understanding. Again and again, he reminded himself that the mind possesses a sanctuary available at any moment. A place untouched by public opinion. Untouched by chaos. Untouched by circumstance. A place where peace can still exist even when the world becomes turbulent. Most people spend their youth searching for that sanctuary outside themselves. They search for it in relationships, in achievements, in recognition, in possessions. Yet after enough years pass, life begins teaching a difficult lesson. Nothing external remains stable forever. Careers change. Friendships evolve. Families grow and drift apart. Bodies age. Dreams transform. The things that once defined us begin slipping through our fingers. And suddenly the question becomes unavoidable. If everything outside me changes, where can I find something permanent? The answer slowly emerges. Within, not because the inner world is perfect, but because it is the only place where true freedom can be cultivated. This is one reason solitude becomes such a gift after 60. The older you become, the more clearly you see the limitations of external pursuits. You have witnessed enough disappointment to stop worshiping expectations. You have witnessed enough success to understand its limits. You have witnessed enough human behavior to recognize how temporary public opinion truly is. The illusions begin falling away. And beneath those illusions sits something precious. The opportunity to know yourself honestly. Perhaps for the first time. Many people spend decades playing roles. The role of provider. The role of parent. The role of spouse. The role of employee. The role of leader. The role of caretaker. Each role carries responsibilities. Each role demands energy. And while these roles may be noble, they are not the entirety of who you are. Yet years can pass without ever asking a simple question. Who am I beneath all these identities? Solitude invites that question. Not aggressively, gently, patiently, like a wise teacher waiting for the student to finally arrive. At first, the silence may feel unfamiliar. The mind continues searching for distraction. Old habits continue reaching outward. But eventually something begins to settle. The internal noise grows quieter. The endless demands lose their urgency. The need to constantly react begins fading. And in that stillness, wisdom starts speaking. Not loudly. Wisdom rarely shouts. It whispers. The problem is that most people are too surrounded by noise to hear it. The older you become, the more valuable those whispers become. Because wisdom often arrives disguised as simplicity. You realize you need fewer possessions than you once believed. Fewer arguments, fewer obligations, fewer approvals, fewer explanations. The list of things you must have becomes shorter. The list of things you appreciate becomes longer. This is not loss. This is liberation. Many people misunderstand aging. They imagine it as a gradual process of decline. But there is another side rarely discussed. Aging can also be a process of refinement. The unnecessary falls away. The essential remains. Just as a sculptor removes stone to reveal the statue hidden within. Life removes illusions to reveal character. The years strip away pretenses. Failures humble the ego. Loss deepens perspective. Time clarifies priorities. And solitude provides the environment where these lessons can finally be understood. A younger person often enters a room asking, "How do others see me?" An older, wiser person enters asking, "How do I see myself?" That shift changes everything. Because peace becomes possible only when attention moves inward. As long as self-worth depends upon external validation, tranquility remains fragile. The opinions of others rise and fall like changing weather. The crowd cheers one day and criticizes the next. A person who depends upon approval becomes emotionally dependent upon forces they cannot control. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly warned himself against this trap. He understood that other people's opinions belong to them. Your character belongs to you. Their judgments belong to them. Your conscience belongs to you. Their praise belongs to them. Your actions belong to you. This distinction becomes increasingly meaningful with age. Because eventually you grow tired of carrying burdens that were never yours. You grow tired of managing perceptions. Tired of proving yourself. Tired of chasing acceptance. Tired of performing. And what remains after that exhaustion is not emptiness. It is freedom. The freedom to sit quietly without needing entertainment. The freedom to think without interruption. The freedom to exist without constant validation. The freedom to simply be. And perhaps this is why solitude becomes less frightening with age. You begin realizing that solitude is not the absence of companionship. It is the presence of yourself. And when you finally learn how to enjoy your own company, a remarkable transformation begins. Because a person comfortable in solitude becomes difficult to manipulate. Difficult to pressure. Difficult to control. They no longer require constant approval. They no longer fear being alone. They no longer compromise their values simply to avoid temporary discomfort. Their strength comes from within. And strength rooted within is far more durable than strength borrowed from external sources. Their strength comes from within. And strength rooted within is far more durable than strength borrowed from external sources. There is a reason calm rivers run deep. There is a reason ancient mountains remain silent. There is a reason the stars do not announce themselves. The strongest things in nature rarely demand attention. They simply exist. Steady, patient, unmoved by the need to be noticed. As people grow older and wiser, many begin reflecting this same quality. Not because they have become indifferent, because they have become discerning. They no longer feel compelled to participate in every argument. No longer feel obligated to defend every opinion. No longer feel the need to explain themselves to people determined not to understand. They have discovered something that youth often overlooks. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every disagreement deserves your response. Not every invitation deserves your acceptance. The older you become, the more precious your energy appears. You begin treating it like a valuable resource. Because you finally understand its limits. When you are young, energy feels endless. You spend it freely. You argue for hours. Worry for days. Chase people who have already left. Seek approval from strangers. Attempt to control outcomes beyond your reach. And only later do you realize how much life was consumed by unnecessary struggle. Age brings a different perspective. You start asking questions that never seemed important before. Will this matter in a year? Will this matter on my final day? Will this matter enough to justify sacrificing my peace? Most of the time, the answer is no. And so you let it go. Not because you stopped caring. Because you started caring about the right things. Peace becomes more valuable than proving a point. Truth becomes more valuable than winning approval. Character becomes more valuable than reputation. Inner harmony becomes more valuable than external success. Marcus Aurelius understood this transformation. As emperor, he could have spent every waking moment obsessing over criticism. No leader receives universal praise. No public figure escapes judgment. Yet his writings repeatedly return to the same lesson. Focus on what is yours to control. Release what is not. Simple words, yet perhaps among the most difficult practices in all of life. Because the human mind naturally reaches outward. It wants certainty, control, guarantees, validation, but wisdom moves in the opposite direction. Wisdom asks us to release our grip on what was never ours. The opinions of others, the actions of others, the choices of others, the future itself. And every time we release one of these burdens, the soul becomes lighter. This lightness often appears in older individuals who have learned life's deeper lessons. You notice it in their presence. They do not rush. They do not panic. They do not react to every disturbance. Their calmness feels almost unusual in a world addicted to urgency. Yet their calmness is not ignorance. It is understanding. They have seen enough storms to know that most eventually pass. They have witnessed enough crises to recognize that panic rarely improves outcomes. They have endured enough hardship to understand their own resilience. The younger mind often seeks certainty. The older mind learns acceptance. And acceptance creates peace. Not because life becomes predictable. Because resistance decreases. Imagine trying to stop the tide. Imagine standing against the ocean and demanding that the waves obey your preferences. The effort would be exhausting, pointless, yet many people spend years doing precisely this with reality itself. Demanding that life unfold according to their expectations. Demanding that people behave according to their desires. Demanding that circumstances conform to their plans. When reality refuses, frustration follows. The Stoics proposed a radical alternative. Align yourself with reality. Move with life rather than against it. Accept what arrives. Respond with virtue. Release the rest. This philosophy becomes increasingly powerful after 60, because life has already provided abundant evidence that control is limited. You have watched plans fail. You have watched surprises emerge. You have watched impossible situations resolve themselves. You have watched expected outcomes disappear. Again and again, life demonstrates that certainty is an illusion. And eventually, fighting uncertainty becomes more exhausting than accepting it. This acceptance does not weaken a person. It strengthens them. Because acceptance directs energy toward action rather than resistance. Toward adaptation rather than complaint. Toward wisdom rather than frustration. The result is a quieter mind. And a quieter mind sees more clearly. This clarity often reveals another unexpected gift of solitude. Perspective. When surrounded by constant noise, perspective becomes difficult. Every problem feels urgent. Every opinion feels important. Every distraction feels significant. But solitude creates distance. And distance reveals proportion. What once seemed overwhelming begins appearing manageable. What once seemed catastrophic begins appearing temporary. What once seemed essential begins appearing trivial. Time itself becomes a teacher. The decades expose patterns. You begin noticing how frequently people worry about things that never happen. How often they sacrifice peace for problems that disappear on their own. How much suffering originates not from events but from anticipation. Seneca understood this deeply. He observed that people frequently suffer more from imagination than reality. And age confirms this observation repeatedly. Many fears never arrive. Many worries prove unnecessary. Many anxieties dissolve with time. Yet countless hours are spent carrying them. The wise eventually learn another way. Not because they become fearless, because they stop treating every fear as truth. They observe their thoughts without obeying them. Observe their emotions without becoming controlled by them. Observe their worries without surrendering to them. This ability grows strongest in silence, because solitude allows observation. The noise of daily life often prevents self-awareness. There is always another distraction, another conversation, another responsibility, another demand. But solitude removes these layers, and beneath them sits the mind itself. Unfiltered, unmasked, revealed. At first this can feel uncomfortable. You encounter unresolved fears, old regrets, forgot griefs, questions long avoided. Yet if you remain patient, something beautiful begins happening. The turbulence settles, the surface clears, and beneath it, a deeper self emerges. A self less concerned with appearances, less concerned with competition, less concerned with proving anything, more concerned with understanding, more concerned with truth, more concerned with living well. This transformation rarely occurs overnight. It unfolds slowly, like sunrise spreading across a landscape, almost invisible moment by moment, yet undeniable when viewed over years. And perhaps that is why solitude becomes such a gift after 60. Not because the world has less to offer, because you have finally learned how much your inner world contains. A richness unnoticed during younger years. A wisdom waiting patiently beneath decades of noise. A peace that cannot be purchased, cannot be inherited, cannot be given by another person. Only discovered. And once discovered, it changes the way you move through life. You stop chasing every opportunity. Stop fearing every ending. Stop reacting to every disturbance. Because you have found something more valuable than excitement. You have found steadiness. And steadiness is one of the rarest forms of wealth a human being can possess. You have found steadiness. And steadiness is one of the rarest forms of wealth a human being can possess. Most people spend their lives accumulating things. Possessions, achievements, experiences, connections. Yet as the years pass, a curious reversal begins to occur. The wisdom of age is not found in accumulation. It is found in reduction. The older tree sheds more leaves than the sapling. The older river moves with less turbulence. The older soul begins releasing what is unnecessary. This is why many people notice their social circle becoming smaller with age. At first, this change can feel unsettling. Names disappear from contact lists. Invitations become less frequent. Friendships fade. Entire chapters of life quietly close. The younger self might interpret this as loss. But wisdom often sees something else. Refinement. Life gradually teaches the difference between company and companionship. Between attention and connection. Between popularity and belonging. In youth, there is often an urge to be surrounded. To be included. To be recognized. The size of the circle feels important. The number of people feels important. The appearance of being connected feels important. But time reveals a different truth. 100 shallow conversations cannot equal one meaningful one. A crowded room cannot replace a peaceful mind. And constant company cannot substitute for genuine understanding. The older you become, the more selective your soul naturally grows. Not out of arrogance, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You begin recognizing which relationships nourish your spirit, and which merely consume your energy. You notice who brings peace, who brings drama, who speaks truth, who thrives on chaos, who supports growth, who resists it. The ability to distinguish these things sharpens with age. And as it sharpens, many relationships naturally fall away. This is not cruelty. It is nature. A gardener does not hate branches when he prunes them. He simply understands that healthy growth requires space. Likewise, wisdom often involves releasing relationships that no longer align with your deepest values. Not through anger, not through conflict, simply through acceptance. The paths diverge. Life moves on, and there is peace in allowing that movement. Marcus Aurelius understood that every human being is changing constantly. The person you were 10 years ago no longer exists. Neither does the person someone else was. Entire identities vanish over time. Entire worldviews evolve. Entire priorities transform. Expecting every relationship to remain unchanged is like expecting a river to stop flowing. Life itself refuses such demands. And yet, many people suffer because they continue measuring the present against the past. They compare today's reality to yesterday's memories. Today's friendships to yesterday's friendships. Today's life to yesterday's life. And comparison creates sorrow where acceptance could create peace. The Stoics proposed a different perspective. Love what is, not what was, not what might have been, not what should have been. What is, because reality exists only here, only now, only in this moment. And nowhere does this lesson become more powerful than when contemplating mortality. Death is a subject many avoid. Yet Marcus Aurelius returned to it repeatedly. Not out of darkness, out of wisdom. He understood that remembering mortality changes the way we live. A person who forgets death often postpones life. A person who remembers death begins valuing life. The awareness that time is finite transforms priorities. Petty arguments lose significance. Old grudges lose importance. Meaningless competitions lose their appeal. The urgent becomes less urgent. The essential becomes more essential. And one of the most essential discoveries often emerges after 60. Time is precious, not because there is less of it, because you finally understand its value. You begin noticing how much of life was spent worrying, how much energy was invested in impressing people who rarely thought about you, how many sleepless nights were sacrificed to concerns that eventually disappeared. And this realization creates an unexpected freedom. You stop volunteering your peace to every disturbance. You stop lending your attention to every distraction. You stop surrendering your emotional state to every opinion. Because you finally understand the cost. Time is life. Attention is life. Energy is life. And spending them wisely becomes a sacred responsibility. This is one reason solitude often feels richer with age. It protects what remains valuable. Not by isolating you from the world, but by reconnecting you to yourself. The world constantly pulls attention outward. News, conflict, expectations, noise. Solitude gently guides attention inward. Toward reflection, toward gratitude, toward understanding, toward presence. And presence becomes increasingly precious. A younger mind often lives in the future. Planning, worrying, anticipating, chasing. An older, wiser mind begins appreciating the present. The warmth of sunlight through a window. The sound of rain against a roof. A quiet mornings. A meaningful conversation. A peaceful evening. Simple things. Ordinary things. Yet somehow these ordinary moments become extraordinary. Because wisdom has taught you something youth rarely understands. Life is happening now. Not later. Not someday. Now. The present moment has always been the destination. We simply spend years believing it lies elsewhere. Marcus Aurelius knew this. Again and again, he reminded himself to return to the present. To the task before him. To the breath within him. To the reality surrounding him. Because the present moment is where life unfolds. And solitude often becomes the doorway through which we finally enter it. Not because solitude removes life, Because it removes distraction. It strips away excess, the endless commentary, the unnecessary urgency, the constant pressure to be somewhere else, someone else, something else, until eventually all that remains is this moment. And you. That meeting can be transformative. Because beneath decades of roles, responsibilities, achievements, and expectations, there remains a deeper self. A quieter self. A wiser self. A self untouched by reputation. Untouched by status. Untouched by public opinion. A self that existed before the world told you who to be. And solitude allows you to hear that self again. Like an old friend whose voice was buried beneath years of noise. At first faint, then clearer, then unmistakable. And when that voice finally returns, something extraordinary happens. Loneliness begins transforming into companionship. Because you realize you are no longer alone. You have yourself, not the fragmented self shaped by external demands. The authentic self, the observing self, the enduring self, the self Marcus Aurelius spent a lifetime cultivating. The self that remains calm when circumstances change. The self that remains steady when others panic. The self that remains free when external conditions become uncertain. And perhaps this is the deepest gift solitude offers after 60. Not escape from the world, but reconciliation with yourself. The realization that peace was never hidden in crowds, never hidden in achievements, never hidden in approval. It was quietly waiting within you all along. It was quietly waiting within you all along. Waiting beneath the noise. Waiting beneath the ambition. Waiting beneath the endless pursuit of more. More success. More recognition. More possessions. More certainty. More control. Life often begins as an expansion outward. A reaching. A striving. A building. We construct identities. Careers. Families. Reputations. Dreams. And for a time this outward movement is necessary. It teaches us, shapes us, tests us. But eventually another movement begins. A movement inwards. Not because life is shrinking. Because understanding is growing. The horizon changes. The questions change. The soul begins seeking something deeper than achievement. Something quieter than applause. Something more enduring than success. Marcus Aurelius spent his life surrounded by power. Yet his writings reveal a man searching not for domination over the world, but mastery over himself. He understood a truth that many discover only late in life. External victories mean little if inner peace remains absent. A person can conquer nations and still be ruled by fear. Still be ruled by anger. Still be ruled by insecurity. Still be ruled by desire. The greatest freedom has never been freedom from circumstance. It is freedom from inner slavery. And solitude becomes one of the great teachers of this freedom. Because when you sit quietly with yourself long enough, illusions begin dissolving. You begin seeing how much energy was spent chasing things that never truly mattered. How many years were surrendered to unnecessary worries. How often you allowed temporary problems to steal permanent moments. And strangely, this realization does not create regret. It creates gratitude. Because wisdom arrived. Perhaps not when you expected. Perhaps not as quickly as you hoped. But it arrived. And wisdom changes the way you see everything, including aging itself. Most cultures speak of aging as though it were a tragedy. As though youth is the peak and everything afterward is decline. But Marcus Aurelius would likely see this differently. Nature does not create phases without purpose. Spring has purpose. Summer has purpose. Autumn has purpose. Winter has purpose. Each season offers gifts unavailable in their others. Youth possesses energy. Age possesses perspective. Youth possesses speed. Age possesses depth. Youth possesses possibility. Age possesses understanding. Neither is superior. Both are necessary. The tragedy is not growing older. The tragedy is growing older without growing wiser. Yet wisdom often emerges precisely because of age. Because age forces confrontation with realities younger minds can ignore. The reality that time is finite. The reality that possessions cannot be carried beyond death. The reality that reputation eventually fades. The reality that every human being shares the same destination. At first, these truths may seem heavy. But the Stoics understood something remarkable. When mortality is accepted, life becomes lighter. Because the need to control everything begins fading. The need to impress everyone begins fading. The need to accumulate endlessly begins fading. Death places all things in proper proportion. The argument that seemed so important loses significance. The insult loses significance. The approval loses significance. The fear loses significance. And what remains? Presence, character, love, gratitude, virtue, the things that have always mattered. The things that remain meaningful until the final breath. This is why many wise individuals appear calmer as they age. Not because life has become easier. Because perspective has become larger. They have stopped expecting permanence from temporary things. Stopped expecting certainty from an uncertain world. Stopped expecting control over what was never controllable. And in releasing these expectations, they discover peace. A peace unavailable to those still fighting reality. There is a beautiful image hidden within Stoic philosophy. Imagine standing beside a river. The water moves continuously, never stopping, never remaining the same. You could spend your entire life demanding that the river hold still. Demanding that it obey your preferences. Demanding that it remain exactly as it was yesterday. You would exhaust yourself. Or you could sit beside it. Observe it. Appreciate it. Move with it. And discover tranquility. Life itself is that river. Years pass. Faces change. Bodies age. Circumstances evolve. Nothing remains fixed. The wise stop demanding stillness from the river. They learn how to flow with it. This is acceptance. Not passive resignation. Active harmony. A willingness to cooperate with reality rather than wage war against it. And nowhere is this harmony more visible than in the person who has learned to enjoy solitude. Because solitude teaches one final lesson. Perhaps the most important lesson of all. You are enough. Not because you are perfect. Not because you have accomplished everything. Not because life unfolded exactly as planned. You are enough because your worth was never dependent upon those things. The world spends decades convincing people otherwise. It tells them they must achieve more. Own more. Become more. Prove more. Acquire more. Yet eventually wisdom asks a different question. What if nothing essential was ever missing? What if peace was not something to acquire? What if peace was something to uncover? Something already present beneath the layers of fear, desire, comparison, and distraction. Marcus Aurelius continually returned to this understanding. The mind possesses their ability to choose its response. The soul possesses their ability to remain aligned with virtue. External events may arrive without invitation, but inner character remains yours. Always. And this realization becomes profoundly liberating. Because it means that even as strength fades, dignity can remain. Even as circumstances change, wisdom can remain. Even as companions depart, peace can remain. Even as the body ages, the soul can continue growing. The final years of life need not be defined by loss. They can be defined by clarity, by simplicity, by gratitude, by freedom, a freedom unavailable to those still trapped in endless striving. A freedom born from understanding what truly matters. And perhaps that is why solitude becomes such a gift after 60. Not because the world has less to offer. Because you finally possess their ability to appreciate what the world has always been offering. The beauty of an ordinary day. The richness of a quiet morning. the comfort of stillness, the dignity of acceptance, the joy of enough. You begin seeing miracles where others see routine. You begin finding abundance where others see absence. You begin discovering companionship within silence itself. And one day, sitting quietly as sunlight moves across the room, you realize something extraordinary. The peace you spent years searching for was never hiding in distant places, never hiding in achievements, never hiding in applause, never hiding in the approval of others. It was here, inside you, waiting patiently through every season, waiting through every success, every disappointment, every victory, every loss, waiting for the moment you finally became still enough to notice it. And in that moment, aging no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a return to simplicity, a return to truth, a return to yourself. The noise grows quieter. The world slows down. The soul grows lighter. And what remains is not loneliness, not regret, not fear, but something far more valuable. A calm mind, a grateful heart, a free spirit, and the quiet understanding that after a lifetime of searching, striving, and becoming, you have finally arrived home.